Hi, welcome to the first of our adult summer reading chat discussions. We're kicking it off with a discussion that you can join in with if you want to. Just leave a comment for us and we'll respond to you. Summer reading is all about animals this year. The theme is Tales and Tales. You see what they did there? And it's all about books and stories that feature animals. We thought it would be interesting to have a chat about some books featuring animals that we've read through and what our thoughts about them were. Maybe some of them are books that you've read. Leave it in the comments. Maybe you totally loved a book and you want to tell us about it. Leave it in the comments. Maybe you really didn't like some book with animals in it and you want to let us know. Leave it in the comments. So let's start our chat by hearing about the book that Jen wanted to tell us about. Jen, can you tell us about this book?
Sure. Let me bring it up on my screen. The book that I'm interested in talking about is actually it's two books. Scent of the Missing by Susanna Charles, and the sequel to that, The Possibility Dogs. Hopefully I can just bring up a real quick screen share of the display. Basically, this is a search and rescue dog handler. And in order to do that, you have to first train as a handler and then be approved to get a search and rescue dog. Eventually, she was approved to get a search and rescue dog, puppy, named Puzzle, who she trained, and Puzzle did in fact pass their tests to become a search and rescue dog. Now, search and rescue dogs are different than, say, the corpse dogs. When somebody goes missing, they call on the search and rescue dogs. There is a lot of handling training for the trainers because the object of the exercise is for the trainer to be the support personnel for the dog, but also to tell the dog when to start working and when to stop. The thing about Susanna is that she spends a lot of time talking about how dogs think, but it's also very clear that dogs think in a different way, that they have a much more limited range of things they think about. So I should find this, you want me to find this smell and good things will happen. In fact, they go out of their way to do practice sessions with dogs to make sure that with living people, to make sure that they get the impression that they're mostly going to find living people who will be very excited to see them. Because otherwise the dogs will get the impression that bad things will happen. Right. If they find somebody. It's a long and difficult journey, not only for Susanna and for her dog Puzzle, but also for the other dogs that the rescue dogs that she has in her house. She has like a positive pride of Pomeranians, some cats, some other elderly dogs. And they all kind of struggle over who gets all the attention. And also the rules, because Puzzle has to have very specific rules about how to function.
Jen, it sounds like it's a book that's a lot about the kind of animal behaviours and the way that the dogs think and stuff like that. Was that the most fascinating thing about it for you?
It was half of what was most fascinating about it. When I went on to read Susanna's following book, The Possibility Dogs, which is a book about therapy, not so much therapy dogs as assistance dogs. Some assistance dogs are therapy dogs, but not all of them are. Assistance dogs can be trained to do things like know when their person is having a meltdown, right, and taking specific actions to disrupt that. Okay. But again, it's all about the animal learning what is wanted of them. So there's a lot about the psychology of dogs in particular and other assistance animals. And I really like the way she tries to get inside the mind of her animal, but without trying to put herself in it.
So it seems like it's kind of like a journey into the mind of dogs, almost in a kind of a way.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I
Huh.
felt like I knew a lot more about
Huh.
dogs from reading
I
those books.
As a person who struggles to comprehend his own dog sometimes, I should probably read that because I'll be, kind of just seeing if the same sort of 5 trigger words elicit some sort of response. Do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to go outside? Do you want a treat? And inevitably, she always wants all of these things. So
Yes,
I never really find out which one it is. So I'll have to
I
see if I can take a leaf out of that book.
one of the things I found fascinating and after that was learning about there are people who set up communication boards for their dogs with
Oh,
recordings,
yeah.
buttons with recordings, and the dog
Uh-huh.
can press the button.
We did
And
get that. We did try that. I've got these little buzzers, and one of them says chicken, chicken. She never really figured it out, but now we have some buttons that say chicken. So and that's where all my batteries went as well. Yeah, that sounds like a good one. I think I might actually be considering taking a look at it because something that gives you a bit more insight into the real ways that it happens, or that animals think, rather than something that's kind of anthropomorphizing things, is probably pretty good.
it's not that I don't love a good anthropomorphized story
Uh-huh.
about an animal's, but I thought a nonfiction story would be a great one to share with people, especially because this is the question specifically about search and rescue dogs who've been in the news for lately, and about assistance dogs, which is something that people are hearing more and more about,
Yeah,
are really topical right now.
that's true too.
And it's funny, Jen, because the two books that I chose by Bruce Cameron, or excuse me, W. Bruce Cameron, were A Dog's Purpose and A Dog's Way Home. And the first one, A Dog's Purpose, follows a dog as basically he's almost reincarnated. He remembers his past lives, but he goes through various journeys of being a play dog, a shelter dog, a search and rescue dog, a pet dog, and finally finds his true calling in saving somebody. And from there, he can go to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And The Dog's Way Home talks about that as well, and also discusses, as you said, like the dog's mindset. He has chore tasks. He must do those tasks. Mm-hmm. And follows through how the dog has that limited version, but he knows his tasks and he follows his tasks no matter what, because he has to please his human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, if you're looking for dogs that are a little less effective at their tasks, John Katz has a whole series about the dogs he knows, including the Dogs of Bedlam Farm, which I have enjoyed greatly. Some of his dogs made it as sheepdogs, and some of them really didn't.
But no dog ever truly fails, surely.
No,
And
but
they're
they just didn't make it as sheepdogs.
But they win it being dogs. Yeah.
Yes.
Krista, that sounded like an interesting book. The Dog's Way Home.
Well, The Dog's Purpose was the first
Dog's
one.
Purpose, right? Okay.
And that was the one about the dog who went through several almost reincarnations.
Uh-huh.
Started out being a feral dog, being born to a mother along a riverbank, getting caught, and unfortunately, for those of us who are dog lovers, eventually gets euthanized, but then comes back again, realizes he's a puppy starting all over again, and takes what he learned from his first mother. And actually, I say he, but it becomes a he and she in various parts throughout the book. And takes what he learned from his first mother and adapts to it in the next one, and ends up escaping from the puppy mill he's born into, and becomes a search and rescue dog. The next reincarnation, the first reincarnation, he becomes a pet to a boy named Ethan. And with him, he does certain things, like Ethan jumps in the lake, and he jumps in the lake to save him. Right. And learns to dive down and bring him back up. So the next reincarnation, he becomes a search and rescue dog. And the one boy he's searching for from nursery school gets caught in a drain and goes underwater, and they figure that's it. But because of what he's learned with Ethan with the lake, he actually saves the boy. And he thinks, oh, I've done my purpose. But then he wakes again. And it goes through several of those ins and outs, and I don't want to tell everybody everything because I do think it's a really good read. But the last one is him finding an adult Ethan. And when he saves the adult Ethan in less of a physical way and more of a emotional, spiritual way, he's done his job.
Oh man.
And he gets to go home.
Oh man. I think.
Yeah, there were a few tears, but the way she writes from the dog's perspective, and the way you get to understand, like the dog had this particular one, the dog seemed to understand a lot more. I think he was a little overthinking for a dog, to be honest, but basically they have tasks, and it's, I'm going to go home. I'm going to, sit. I'm going to stay. I don't like stay, but if I stay, I get treats. Now, in the second book he did, which was A Dog's Way Home, is about a dog who basically becomes an emotional support dog at a vet hospital, VA hospital, but gets kicked out because they think he's part pit bull, and he gets kicked outside the city limits, and he's about 2 hours away through the Colorado Rockies, and he finds his way back to his original human. Oh. Because the human has taught him certain tricks about go home, and the go home was to keep him from the dog catchers. When he was a pup, he would go to a certain part of the house and hide in the bushes. Okay. And when he gets taken away, he doesn't understand why. He knows his human was sad, but he knows he's got to go home. So he ends up traveling in the company of a mountain lion at one point, hunting together with her. He finds a few other humans that he helps along the way, but he has basic knowledge. He needs to go home. He needs to find Ethan, and he needs to help people.
So this is like a whole genre of books. There's like things like The Incredible Journey and things like that, where like animals are finding their way home.
Yes.
This, I mean, coming from this author who's had this previous book that you just told us about, where there's the reincarnation aspect of it, and the way that author's kind of primed me to kind of think of things in maybe a slightly more metaphysical way. So does that carry on into this second book?
It definitely does, because he goes through some of the owners that he goes through. There's an alcoholic, there's somebody who ends up passing away, and through each one, he knows that like his job is to help and his job is to save because of his work at the VA hospital. Okay. And so he knows he stays with this person long enough to help. And when he's helped as long as he can and that person isn't there anymore, he's got to go back to find home and go to the next person. And he continues his journey. So he doesn't necessarily get reincarnated in The Dog's Way Home. Right. But he helps others to find their true purpose. Yeah. Or to achieve, I guess, enlightenment to a certain degree. Interesting. I want to kind of draw a parallel between the books that you mentioned and actually the ones that Jen mentioned as well, because they're all kind of about purposes. They're all about animals as a way to, well, not as a way in the book, in the search and rescue and the companion dogs stuff, because they're real, but like in a way, like all of these things are about seeing animals as ways to like look at purpose and look at and these written from the dog's viewpoint. It just gave me a perspective, a simplified perspective on how we see the world. You know, we have the same thing. We have a purpose, we have a task, we have, a journey. And this was all played out through the dog, especially in the last one, Bella, who was the dog's journey home. And, Bella had her task. She had to take care of her human. Her purpose was to help people and make them feel better. Her journey was literally to be with her human and find home. Well, we're all sort of finding home, to an extent. And we all, I think, to a certain extent, want to help people. You can kind of go through the path with Bella and see, and the people that she helps are not always the people that you and I would consider worthy of help. She helps I think he was a Desert Storm vet who's got a lot of mental issues, and he's not always the nicest guy, and he's done some things, but she just sees that he, she feels his pain, she feels his emotions, and she knows that when he's with her and she puts her head on him, his emotions go down, so she's helping. This is always the way with stories. They take us to places we wouldn't go ourselves sometimes,
Yeah. The other thing about both the Susanna Charleston books and to a certain extent John Katz's books, we tend to think of dogs as having, they get a forever home. Maybe they only have one iteration of,
Uh-huh.
oh, well, they went out to a bad place and got returned, they get rehomed and that's their forever home. But sometimes dogs have to change and make changes in the same way that we do through changes of our lives when people are not there or home changes. And it's an interesting experience to read about from the perspective of people who take in older dogs.
Oh, yeah, that too. Actually, oh, a friend. Yeah, this is like off topic. A friend of mine was actually just writing about that for a blog, but it's completely off topic. But she wrote about the preciousness of taking on older dogs because you're always very aware of the fact that all of this time is precious. Speaking of precious time, you see that segue we did there, Eric. What books have you got to talk to us about?
Well, unlike hold on, I'm sorry, hold on. Unlike Jennifer and Krista, who did books on dogs, I did mine on a rabbit. Usagi Yojimbo, who is a masterless samurai rabbit. Yeah, I mean, he looks quite mean on the cover, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It was created by Stan Sakai. He was a Japanese-born American. Like I said, it's Usagi Yojimbo, whose name literally means Master Samurai Rabbit, because the first name Usagi means rabbit. And our Master Samurai is also known as a Ronin. He journeys the countryside, is getting into fights, meeting lots and lots of characters. In fact, sometimes the characters can get hard to keep track of all the characters that he meets. The book, there's 35 books, so it's a very long epic, and it's still going. And I think, like I said, I mean, it's told in a series of vignettes, so it's not like but there's an overarching plot to it. Like, for instance, in the first book, he ends up helping a young boy get to the shogun to deliver a message because his family was killed, and he delivers a message to the shogun saying, hey, this guy can't be trusted, and it turns out the shogun is like in on it and stuff like that. And
I have a question actually. What kind of animal universe does this take place in? I mean, are all the humans rabbits, or are the humans various different animals, or are the humans humans, or is he the only rabbit?
There are no humans.
Right.
All the animals are alphamorphized or whatever. So it's like, for instance, my favorite character in the book is Tomoe, who was a female samurai, which is he befriends on his journeys. I mean, it's violent, but it's not like that violent. There's like no dismemberment, decapitations, or any blood, because it's basically black and white, like most Japanese manga.
And rabbits are vegetarians as well, I would like to point out.
Yes. But like I said, it's a very long story, and it's got lots and lots of characters. I think it can appeal to children because children like see it like a little rabbit with a sword, and they're like, cool. And adults will see it, adults will read it for the very long, complex story. And, like, for instance, in the first series, there's like this rhinoceros who Usagi befriends, who skips out on a bill with him or something. They go out drinking, and the rhinoceros skips out on a bill. Oh. And makes Usagi pay for it. And Usagi's kind of ticked off at him later.
Oh man, does the story do anything with the kind of stereotypical characters of like rabbits or rhinos or whatever? Does it kind of use that as a sort of sounding board or a jumping off place to do things?
No, I think every character is unique. I mean, Usagi, he's sometimes grouchy. He's not somewhat of a nice person, but he's very deep character, and he's not. Like I say, he's grouchy, he can be mean, but he's also very loyal to his friends. And he lives his life with honor because he's a samurai.
Right.
So they have to, because a lot of the tropes for the samurai stuff comes into the story a lot. So.
So the samurai story tropes come in a fair bit.
Yeah, a lot of I must kill you because of honor and stuff like that.
Not because I'm a rabbit.
Yeah, it's just
Well, oddly enough, both you and I chose books about rabbits. I chose Watership Down, which is kind of a, I guess, acknowledged as a classic. People know Watership Down probably from the movies. People know the I think they had a new sort of digital version come out on Netflix. Came out 3 or 4 years ago there. Not that I've seen it, but it's a book that I've read a couple of times and love. So for people who maybe don't know the plot, it is a story told from the point of view of a band of rabbits, and their home is threatened for various different reasons, and they're anthropomorphized, and they can talk to each other, and they do have kind of human motivations almost throughout the book, but they lead the lives of rabbits, and that's kind of I think, Jen, you were mentioning this to me. It kind of continually calls on this natural history, whose name I can't remember.
The Private Life of the Rabbit
That's the one, the private
by
life of the rabbit.
Loxley.
So it actually is, in a certain kind of a way, it's sort of true to life of some of the things that will happen to rabbits in their lives, but it's told as if it's a sort of human adventure, and it's immensely moving. I thought, because it's about this kind of life journey that these rabbits go on to try and find a new home for themselves, and it has all these sort of kind of metaphorical significances that kind of ring out as you go through the book. And it's, for a book about rabbits, it's entirely kind of serious. It's so it rings so true emotionally to me that I one always is forgetting that one's reading a book about rabbits and they're kind of struggle to find a life for themselves. So they're basically just going on this long journey, this kind of, I mean, this is like standard adventure fare, but they're going on a long journey through an unknown land with unknown enemies, and they have various different kind of means of defeating things and using their smarts to do it, and various wonderful things are told from the perspective of a rabbit, like things float downstream if you get on them and you can escape, and it's all very wonderful. And none of this is told in a kind of mocking way or like a belittling way towards the rabbits. It's just that this is their experience of it. But beyond that, beyond all the adventure stuff, there's all sorts of kind of undertones that I kind of pick up on with it. Like, it's definitely a war story. The shock that the rabbits go through in various different things, the way that they encounter their enemies, the kind of the horror and the pity of war, essentially, are kind of there, even though we're talking about a story that's to do with rabbits, because it's all taken so very seriously in a way. And it's just, for something that's become beloved as a kind of children's classic, I think it's a really wonderful story. Yeah, I've reread it a couple of times myself. I don't know if anybody else has read it and has things to say about it, but I kind of found those rabbits kind of wonderful.
I would never give Watership Down to any child to read. If they find it for themselves, well and good. Mm-hmm. Nor would I let I know several people who were deeply traumatized by accidentally starting to watch the movie when it
right
on TV.
Yeah,
as children.
It is very heavy, definitely.
It is, and actually later on he came out with a book of short stories that are mythology of the rabbits.
The tales from the Watership.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah,
okay.
And I found that fascinating too.
The story is actually kind of interleaved with a lot of mythological references and stuff like that, and I'd very much I do take your point, definitely, that it's not altogether an easy or an untroubled read, because death is there all the time in this book. It's, in a lot of ways, that's like, it is a literal character. I mean, the Black Rabbit of Inlay is death and is a literal character in the book. Kind of framed in one of the stories, but the possibility of death is all around them all the time. So it's a very dark book in that sense.
And I think in a different generation and a different time point, that may have been a more acceptable version of a children's story. I don't think for kids today it's necessarily what they're used to or what they're going to come to expect. But when there were kids growing up during a wartime, and death was part of their everyday life, and dad might not come home, and I think that perhaps that was easier way to explain the things about war to the children. Then, now, unfortunately, I have children, they grow up, they see the news, they know a little bit too much about it, and we choose to steer them away from that in their fiction, in their reading, in their entertainment, to lighthearted stuff, because the death and the reality is every day, everywhere, and inescapable. So if I'm going to give my kids something to escape to, it's not going to be something about death and destruction and war. It's a good teaching tool about that, but it's not an escapism that I would necessarily steer my kids to.
Well, I remember reading the book a long time ago, and I just remember how dark and violent it is. I would think if you want to give this book to children, you would probably know your children best on whether they can handle it or not.
I think no. I want to jump back because I think it's getting a bad rap here. I do very much acknowledge that those things are in it, and it's an adventure story, and there are deaths in it, but it's not a violent book all the time.
Right.
There is violence in it, and it's not exploitative. It's not. It doesn't linger on any of these things, and it doesn't present them as horror. It presents it as part of the rabbits' lives.
And it's definitely no worse than, say, Harry Potter or any of the other series that you have the journey and the death and any of that. It's just, my children are 9. I choose to take our entertainment in a different form.
Yeah, it wouldn't be.
We haven't done Harry Potter or anything yet. Yeah. It's a little too deep for them. And I have one child who's very emotional and would definitely not be able to handle that.
I think just in a literary sense, it would be a rough read for children of that age. Anyway,
it's an epic. It is absolutely an epic. It was in a lot of ways because I kept rabbits, so I read that book fairly young. It was really my first introduction to an epic genre. And when I look back at it, I think like the children's equivalent to that is Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. But
which scarred me.
What?
Which scarred me. We had rats.
But it's an epic. It has way more in common with Beowulf, or not even The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. Than it does with The Wind in the Willows.
Right.
Yes.
So The Wind in the Willows is a book that grown-ups that definitely has a grown-up subtext as well.
Yeah. If you don't mind.
Could I just add another series if I could?
Oh, please do.
Now, this is one I read for fun, but it's David Rosenfeld, and I can't really see that too much with the glare. This is a series of his called the Andy Carpenter Mysteries, and he is a lawyer from Paterson, New Jersey, who inherited some money, and his first book ever deals with in basically coming across this golden retriever, Tara, who needs to be saved, and then deciding that Tara is the best creature to ever inhabit this earth. He then goes on in other books, all law mysteries, all with a very Jersey sense of humor, local places, local references that we're all going to get. But he solves the mysteries, he gets the good guys freed, of course, but always in the book is Tara and usually at least 1 or 2 other dogs who are involved with the criminals that he takes on that prove to him that these guys can't be all bad because they love a dog. So therefore he has to represent them. But they are a good, fairly lighthearted read. I love the fact that, in this particular one, he's an LBI, he's going to Little Silver, he's going to Plainfield, and you're like, oh yeah, I know exactly where he's talking about.
I think I've met that dog.
Park. Yeah. I like that. To me, this is my type of escapism. And I love the fact that the dogs are part of it, and I can, get feeling for the person via the fact also that, if they love a dog, they can't be all that bad. Surely they didn't kill anybody.
Surely not.
Surely not.
That sounds great.
It is a fun read. It is a series that we do have several, and I will be finding the ones because this is actually beyond the last one I read, so I have to find the in-between ones now.
I do love a book where you can kind of pick off places that you know and stuff like
Yes,
that.
it kind of brings you into it a little bit more.
It makes me wish I actually enjoyed the Alexander McCall Smith ones more, because I would love to read a whole bunch of books about Edinburgh, but me personally,
Yeah, it ain't too much for me either. I'll
Yeah.
stick with David.
yeah. So yeah, stick with him, and we'll stick with the
We'll stick with Jersey.
stick with Jersey, everybody. Stick with Jersey. Thanks for joining us today for our first adult summer reading chat. What books have you been reading? Doesn't have to be about animals. Maybe you'd like to join us over Zoom for a future chat. You can leave us a comment, and we'll see you for our next episodes next week at the same time. Thanks a lot, and bye-bye for now, and enjoy your summer of Tales and Tales.